Whispers in the rainforest. Rain hammered Adriana's clinic, a relentless tattoo on the corrugated iron roof that usually soothed her. Tonight, it only amplified the tremor flitting through her fingers. Her gaze remained locked on the satellite phone, its screen alight with the emergency signal. A sequence of numbers she had painstakingly coded with her rainforest contacts years ago. Catastrophe, it declared. From her bedside table, she snatched a dog-eared notebook. Each digit was a key, unlocking words, phrases, locations, within a matrix merging indigenous tongues with scientific jargon. Her fingers danced across the page in the dim light, deciphering the message. By the time she finished, icy dread had taken root in her gut. Asterisk virus, hemorrhagic, rampant spread, Yanomami village, quarantine breach, highly lethal, origin, unknown, require immediate intervention, distrust all, asterisk. The words blurred. A hemorrhagic virus, amuck in the Amazon, a potential global pandemic loomed, and the stark warning. Asterisk distrust all asterisk, hinted at a deeper corruption. Someone knew, and their silence suggested motives far darker than mere containment. Government? Corporate giants? More invested in suppression than salvation. She straightened, the initial shock replaced by a burgeoning resolve. Boots on, she inhaled the familiar scent of earth and leather, centering herself. She needed a team. Small, discreet, unshakable. Jungle-wise souls, impervious to pressure, and worthy of her absolute faith. Isabella first, the Yanomami tracker, her rainforest acumen unmatched. Then Marcos, the ex-military medic, his past a burden, his loyalty a bulwark, his skills indispensable. Lastly, David, the fledgling epidemiologist, idealistic yet brilliant, hungry to prove his worth, armed with crucial scientific expertise. Point 3 brief. Coded missives flew through the digital ether, each a personalized summons wrapped in local lore and private jokes at a risky gamble using digital channels, but time was a luxury they lacked. After sending them, she ripped the satellite phone's battery out. Every communication was potentially compromised. In the clinic's silence, she gathered essential equipment. Medical kits, satellite maps, purification tablets, antibiotics enough to treat an entire village. She packed with practiced economy, her mind a whirlwind of scenarios and contingencies. The mission teetered on the edge of suicidal, but she couldn't stand idly by while a pandemic ignited. The Yanomami's lives, the fate of countless others, hinged on her response. Half a world away, in a sterile London office perched high above the city, Kruger listened, unmoved, as Mr. Thorne, Omnicorp CEO, concluded his briefing. Thorne, a titan of the pharmaceutical world, steepled his fingers, his gaze drilling into Kruger. The situation is sensitive. Kruger. A novel virus, surfacing in the Amazon, potent beyond measure, and intensely valuable. Kruger's eyebrow twitched, a flicker of interest in his glacial eyes. Valuable how? Suffice to say, it holds the potential to reshape entire industries, Thorne murmured, leaning closer. We believe it could unlock enhanced immunity, accelerated healing. The possibilities are limitless. Kruger leaned forward. And your concern is premature acquisition by a competitor. Thorne nodded grimly. Precisely. We've detected interference. A ragtag team, spearheaded by Dr. Adriana Vasquez. She represents a complication. Fiercely dedicated, unervingly resourceful, and deeply entrenched within the local populace. She will likely attempt containment and public disclosure. Her humanitarian impulses are inconvenient, Kruger observed, a hint of amusement coloring his voice. Indeed. Hence, your involvement, Kruger. I require you to secure the virus. Isolate it. Deliver it to us. And eliminate any impediments to that objective. Kruger's lips stretched into a thin smile. Eliminate. Permanently, Thorne affirmed. Dr. Vasquez and her associates must not be allowed to succeed. Consider it accomplished. Kruger stated, his voice devoid of warmth. Authorization parameters. Thorne recited a figure. Kruger gave a slow nod. A lavish budget. But unsurprising. The virus's potential yield was astronomical. Rules of engagement. Kruger pressed. Thorne paused. A flicker of unease crossing his features. Discretion is vital, Kruger. But, within reason, all means are justified. Kruger rose. Understood. He turned to depart, but Thorne halted him. Kruger, Thorne said, his voice laced with a strange gravity. This transcends mere profit. This is about the future of humankind. Kruger paused. His back to Thorne, he didn't turn. Naturally, he replied, his voice dripping with subtle derision. The future of humankind. He exited, leaving Thorne alone in his opulent sanctuary. The city's low thrum the only sound. Back in Letitia, Adriana met Isabella on the rainforest's fringe. The tracker materialized from the shadows, a rifle across her back, her face a mask of worry. Adriana, it's worse than we heard. The pestilence, devouring the land. I know, Adriana responded, her voice taut. We must hasten. They found Marcos at their designated rendezvous, a deserted riverbank. The medic was already present, meticulously organizing his supplies that he appeared weary, yet his eyes burned with resolution. Ready when you are, Doc, he said, his voice rough but comforting. David arrived last, his youthful features pale with trepidation. He gripped a backpack overflowing with equipment, his hands trembling subtly. This is actually happening, isn't it? He asked, a touch of panic in his voice. Adriana placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Yes, David.it is. And it will be arduous. But we're the only hope. She examined her team, her heart overflowing with a confluence of fear and unyielding conviction. They were a disparate ensemble, bonded by a shared mission. The odds were insurmountable. They were stepping into a potential abyss, but retreat was not an option. We depart at dawn, she declared, her voice steady. We're entering the rainforest. And we're ending the scourge, whatever the cost. As they prepared for their trek, a helicopter spiraled down from the sky above Manaus. Kruger stepped out, followed by a unit of heavily armed mercenaries, his eyes, cold and calculated, swept across the panorama. The hunt was underway, into the green hell. The air, thick as consomme and rank with leaf rot and phantom blooms, pressed down on them. Adriana swiped at her brow, smudging the camouflage paint into a muddy streak. Their dugout, propelled by a puttering engine, knifed through the tea-colored waters of the Amazon tributary. Beside her, Marcus, the medic, his gaze honed by experience, surveyed the jungle's edge, hand hovering near the tranquilizer gun strapped to his leg. Elena, the anthropologist and translator, sat forward in the prow, a complex blend of trepidation and wonder mirrored in her obsidian eyes. ETA to the village, Elena? Adriana asked, her voice just audible over the engine's drone. Elena consulted the worn map splayed across her thighs. 2 days, give or take, assuming the river remains navigable. This stretch, though, she tapped a faint line, is claimed by the Guerreros de la Selva. Caution is paramount. The jungle warriors. Local thugs infamous for their brutality and territorial skirmishes. Avoiding them was crucial. Adriana tightened her grip on the rifle across her lap. Humanitarianism was one thing. A gunfight, entirely another. The waterway constricted, the banks rising, interlocking branches creating a sun-dappled tunnel. The atmosphere grew heavier still, the silence punctuated by primate chatter and the relentless whine of insects. A shout shattered the quiet. Halt! Identify yourselves. Adriana killed the engine. The sudden stillness amplifying the tension. 4 figures materialized from the undergrowth, clad in mismatched fatigues, bandanas concealing their faces, assault rifles at the ready. The leader, a massive man with a jagged scar bisecting his cheek, advanced. "State your purpose," he growled, his voice a gravelly rasp. Elena stepped forward, hands raised in a placating gesture. "We're physicians and researchers," she announced in fluent Portuguese, her tone level and assured. "We're here to offer medical care to the Yanomami." Suspicion tightened the leader's features. Medical care? Under whose banner? Humanities, Adriana countered, her voice resolute. "We carry no weapons, only medicine and supplies. A necessary fabrication," the leader gestured, and his men fanned out, encircling the canoe. A gaunt teenager with skittish eyes began rifling through their cargo. He unearthed a box of syringes, examining them with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "What are these for?" he stammered. "Vaccinations," Marcus answered smoothly, his voice laced with reassurance. "To shield the Yanomami from sickness." The leader listened intently, his gaze flicking between Elena, Adriana, and the open supplies. After an agonizing pause, he slightly lowered his weapon. "Pass," he conceded, his voice curt. "But be warned, this jungle eats the unwary. Consider yourselves notified." Relief flooded Adriana as she nodded. Restarting the engine, she steered the canoe past the militia and back into the embrace of the jungle. Rounding a bend, she exhaled slowly. "That was tight," Marcus murmured, mopping his forehead. "Far too tight," Adriana agreed. "We need a lighter footprint." Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Manaus, inside a decaying warehouse bathed in shadow, Kruger scrutinized a satellite image projected on the wall. A tiny canoe crawled along a serpentine river, a jade thread through a tapestry of green. "There," he rumbled, his voice a low thrum. "Vasquez and her crew." His mercenaries, battle-scarred veterans of forgotten wars, stood in silent anticipation. Kruger jabbed at the map. "They're headed for Yanomami territory. Intercept them. .0 witnesses." He swiveled towards a man with a shaved head crisscrossed by a spiderweb tattoo. "Raul, touch base with our local assets. See if they've crossed paths. Pinpoint their trajectory." Raul nodded, eyes alight with predatory glee. "Done, Kruger." Kruger returned to the satellite image, his face set in a hard mask. The mission mattered above all else, and not even the implacable Amazon would deter him. The virus was far too dangerous to fall into opposing hands, and Adriana Vasquez, with her infuriating resolve and tiresome morality, was a problem that required a solution. A cruel smile twisted his lips, sending a ripple of unease through the ranks of even his most ruthless men. The chase was on. Ambush. The screech of a macaw ripped through the humid air, a final, innocent sound before the world exploded. A volley of automatic gunfire tore through the undergrowth, shredding leaves and bark. Elena screamed, a high-pitched sound instantly cut short. Marcus yelled something, a word lost in the roar of the assault. Adriana reacted instinctively, diving for cover behind the thick trunk of a kapok tree. The air crackled with near misses, bullets thudding into the wood around her. She caught a glimpse of the attackers, 3 men, clad in black tactical gear, faces obscured by balaclavas, moving with a practiced ruthlessness that chilled her to the bone. These weren't opportunistic bandits. These were professionals. Kruger's professionals. She fumbled for the pistol tucked into her waistband, her heart hammering against her ribs. This trip was supposed to be under the radar, a quiet incursion. How had he found them? Another burst of gunfire ripped bark from the tree inches from her head. Elena was down. Marcus was frantically returning. Fire from behind a fallen log, his movements desperate, almost frantic. "Adriana, run!" he shouted, his voice strained. "Get the sample out of here!" He knew, he understood the stakes. The weight of that knowledge slammed into her. This wasn't just about them anymore. It was about the virus, about preventing a potential pandemic. Adriana made a split-second decision. She wouldn't survive a sustained firefight. Her team was outgunned, outmaneuvered. Her priority had to be the sample. She risked a glance. Marcus was pinned down, but still firing Elena. She couldn't bear to look again. With a surge of adrenaline, Adriana broke cover, sprinting low through the dense undergrowth, heading deeper into the jungle. The mercenaries saw her move. Two of them immediately shifted their focus. Their weapons tracking her, bullets whizzed past, snapping branches and kicking up dirt. She stumbled, tripped over a root, and landed hard, scraping her knees and elbows. Pain shot through her, but she ignored it, scrambling back to her feet. She had to get to the rendezvous point, the small clearing where they had arranged for a helicopter extraction. That it was their only hope. She risked another look back. Marcus was down. He lay motionless behind the log. A wave of grief and guilt washed over her, threatening to paralyze her. She forced it down. She couldn't afford to break. Not now. She plunged deeper into the tangled vegetation, pushing through thorny vines and wading through murky puddles. The mercenaries were still behind her, their pursuit relentless. She could hear their shouts, their heavy footsteps crashing through the undergrowth. They were closing in. Adriana reached the clearing, her lungs burning, her muscles screaming in protest. It was empty. No helicopter. Just the oppressive silence of the jungle, punctuated by the distant sounds of her pursuers. Panic threatened to overwhelm her. She fought it back, forcing herself to think. She had to buy herself some time. She needed to create a diversion, something to throw them off her trail. She pulled a small flare from her backpack, the kind they used to signal the helicopter. With trembling hands, she ignited it, the sudden burst of crimson light momentarily blinding her. She tossed it in the opposite direction from which she intended to flee, hoping it would draw their attention. Then, she ran until her legs felt like lead, until her breath came in ragged gasps, until the sounds of the mercenaries faded into the distance. She collapsed against the base of a giant ceiba tree, her body shaking with exhaustion and fear. She was alone. Elena and Marcus, gone. The sample, secure in its protective case, strapped to her thigh, was all that remained. She fumbled for her satellite phone, her fingers clumsy and unresponsive. After what felt like an eternity, she managed to power it on. The signal was weak, barely a flicker. She typed a short, desperate message. Ambush, Yanomami territory. Need immediate extraction. Sample secure. She attached her GPS coordinates and hit send. The phone went silent. She stared at the screen, willing it to connect, willing someone to answer. Nothing. She tried again, and again. Each attempt met with the same frustrating silence. The signal was too weak, the connection too tenuous. Adriana closed her eyes, exhaustion and despair threatening to consume her. She was alone, deep in the Amazon, hunted by ruthless mercenaries, with a deadly virus in her possession and no way to call for help. But beneath the fear, a spark of defiance remained. She had come too far, sacrificed too much, to give up now. She would survive. She had to, for Elena, for Marcus, for the countless lives that depended on her. She took a deep breath, steeled her resolve, and opened her eyes. The jungle was dark, unforgiving, and silent. But somewhere, out there, was hope, and she would find it. The hammer's call. The axe's percussive thud echoed through the humid air as it cleaved the seasoned oak, each swing, a testament to years of practiced efficiency, barely drew a bead of sweat from John the Hammer Smith. The cloying Amazonian heat, a palpable presence, seemed an inconsequential nuisance. His movements possessed the steady inevitability of jungle creepers engulfing forgotten ruins. He was a study in faded utility. Denim jeans, a gray Henley shirt bearing the ghosts of coffee spills, and something more. Ominous and time-ravaged leather boots. His eyes, the color of tempered steel, constantly surveyed the vibrant green panorama, even as his hands performed their task. Solitude. A mantle worn with ease, cloaked him. He straightened, the axe head resting on his shoulder, and expelled a stream of tobacco juice into the dense undergrowth his cabin. A sturdy refuge fashioned from roughly hewn logs and a palm-thatched roof spoke volumes of self-reliance. No humming wires, no gushing pipes, only the fundamental necessities and a sanctuary for his inner turmoil. The sudden, abrasive squawk of the ancient shortwave radio on the porch shattered the quiet like a dropped pane of glass. He froze, a tick flickering in his jaw. Months had passed since he last bothered with the contraption. A relic of a life he'd fought to inter reluctantly. He made his way towards it, a limp favoring his left leg, a permanent memento from a distant firefight. Distress? Amazon Medical? Kruger? Coordinates. The transmission, frail and fractured by static, carried a chilling familiarity. The name Kruger ripped through the interference, a jagged edge against his senses, his fist clenched. Kruger, a specter that had haunted his nights for far too long. He worked the dial, his fingers exhibiting surprising dexterity despite their weathered texture. Attempting to clarify the signal, he managed to glean a set of coordinates before the radio coughed and died, plunging him back into the suffocating silence. He glared at the defunct device, his thoughts a turbulent torrent. Kruger presaged trouble, the kind that littered landscapes with corpses and shattered dreams. He knew the man, his ruthless efficiency, his casual disregard for human life. Aiding whoever cried out on the airwaves meant returning to that abyss, a world he'd vowed to forsake. He walked to the porch's edge, gazing into the verdant labyrinth. The atmosphere dripped with the pungent aroma of damp earth and decaying foliage. Another jungle surfaced in his memory, another assignment, another desperate plea. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The rain had been an unceasing deluge, transforming the Vietnamese jungle into a mire of mud and despair. He was younger then, his physique honed by action, his face unblemished by the cruelties of time. His team was cornered, hopelessly outmatched. A green medic, fresh from training, screamed for aid as shrapnel tore through his leg. John, then a special forces operative, had attempted a rescue, only to be met with withering fire. That he recalled the medic's wide, haunted eyes, the gurgling death rattle as he choked on his own blood. That he remembered the stabbing agony in his shoulder as a bullet found its mark. He remembered his own frantic radio call for extraction, disregarded by command. They were expendable in the grand scheme. He'd pulled through, but the medic hadn't, nor had the majority of his squad. He carried their specters with him, seared into his memory. The official report dismissed it as acceptable losses, a wartime inevitability. But to John, it was a betrayal, an indelible mark. It was the catalyst that swapped his ranger badge for a life lived in isolation. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Returning to the present, the sun began its descent, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and violet. He re-entered the cabin and retrieved a wooden box from beneath his cot. Inside, secured within an oilcloth wrapping, lay his old service pistol, a Colt 1911. He hadn't touched it in years, yet its weight in his grasp felt familiar, a somber reassurance. He checked the magazine, the mechanism gliding with well-maintained precision despite its long idleness. He also picked up a sheathed Bowie knife, its blade gleaming with a muted luster. A flicker of a smile played on his lips. Some instincts refuse to die. He regarded the coordinates scrawled on a tattered scrap of paper. It was a long shot, a reckless venture. Still, he couldn't turn a deaf ear. He understood the feeling of utter isolation, of being pursued with nowhere to run. He understood the taste of desperation. His gaze drifted to a faded photograph affixed above his cot, a radiant woman with gentle eyes and a young boy mirroring his own rebellious hair. Sarah, his wife, and Billy, his son. Fatalities of a drunk driver a decade prior. Another tragedy he was powerless to avert. He closed his eyes, the images coalescing. The medic's dying agony, his bereaved family, the desperation clinging to the fractured transmission. Weariness clung to him, but he knew what his course should be. He strapped the pistol to his side, secured the knife to his belt, and hefted his weathered leather backpack, pausing at the threshold. His eyes swept the cabin, a silent adieu to the life he was abandoning. The jungle beckoned. A symphony of shadow and hazard, and John the Hammer Smith, pursued by his past, was compelled to answer. He stepped into the verdant maw, a stark silhouette against the fading twilight, prepared to confront the demons he had desperately tried to outrun at an unlikely alliance. The air was a suffocating blanket, thick with the reek of leaf rot and sodden earth. Adriana, balanced on a damp log, dabbed at a wound on her forearm, her face ashen beneath a sheen of perspiration. The makeshift bandage, a strip torn from her already ravaged shirt, was scant protection before she saw him. She knew he was there, the sharp snap of a branch underfoot, too purposeful for any animal. She tightened her grip on the machete beside her, her pulse a frantic drum against her ribs. He materialized from the verdant gloom, a figure hewn from granite and shadow. John Smith, his eyes, the color of gunmetal, raked over her with a calculating intensity that raised gooseflesh on her arms. That a contained storm of violence simmered just beneath the surface. He was everything she instinctively mistrusted. A man of action, seemingly devoid of sentiment. Vasquez. His voice was a guttural murmur, sandpaper on stone. She gave a curt nod, her fingers clenching around the machete's handle. "You're the help." The word rescue felt too much like surrender. He grunted. An ambiguous sound. He offered no hand. No soothing words. He remained a static force, unyielding. "Kruger's breathing down your neck." The name slammed into her like a physical blow. Kruger, the architect of this personal hell. The man who had twisted her research, her life's work, into a bioweapon. "How close is close?" she managed, her voice threadbare. "Close enough to smell the fear." He moved then, with a surprising fluidity for his size, circling the confined space, every sense on high alert. Anything besides that rusty blade to offer a fight. Adriana indicated the paltry remains of her gear scattered around her, a backpack half empty, a medkit stripped bare of essentials, a water canteen teasingly low. "Barely, they stripped me clean." He crouched, assessing her belongings with a critical gaze. "What's the endgame? Besides struggling to survive, which you seem to be failing at?" Her control frayed. "I'm trying to staunch a viral pandemic, a mutated hemorrhagic fever. Omnicorp weaponized it, and Kruger's here to ensure its containment, within the local population, of course." John's expression remained a mask that he'd witnessed, perhaps enacted worse. "And you think you can halt it with band-aids and ideals? I have samples," she snapped back, her voice gaining an edge. "And the key to creating the antidote. I just need to reach a secured lab, somewhere I can synthesize it on a grand scale." He straightened, his gaze fixed on something unseen beyond the trees. "Labs require resources, power, personal. All things Kruger will be monitoring." A beat. He refocused on her. "Aside from playing medic, what are your strengths?" Adriana met his stare head-on, refusing to yield. "I'm a virologist. I comprehend this virus on a level no one else can. I know its weaknesses, its vulnerabilities, and I adapt." "Adapt well enough to live?" He nodded towards her wounded arm. "You look like you need a guardian." "I don't need a guardian," she retorted. "I need someone who can forge a path. Someone who knows how to vanish. Someone who can handle Kruger." A flicker, a ghost of pain perhaps, or suppressed rage, crossed his features at the sound of the name. "I can handle Kruger," he stated quietly, the unspoken threat hanging heavy in the air. "But I operate alone." "Then operate with me," Adriana pleaded, urgency giving her voice a ragged quality. "Because alone, we don't stand a chance." He studied her for a long, pregnant moment, his gaze unwavering. "We do this my way, and no debate and no inquiries. You obey my orders without pause. Understood?" She hesitated, the thought of trusting him feeling like a violation of her principles. But the alternatives were non-existent. Understood. Meanwhile, deeper in the jungle's embrace, Kruger stood poised on a muddy embankment, the cloying humidity doing nothing to warm the glacial chill in his eyes. He held a satellite phone pressed to his ear, listening to the terse report. She's heading east. Trajectory suggests the Rio Negro. Minimal resources point one potential contact. Kruger's lips curved into a chilling smile, predatory and devoid of warmth. Vasquez always was predictable. And this contact? Unconfirmed, sir. But initial assessments indicate John Smith. Kruger's grip on the phone tightened. Smith. He hadn't anticipated this complication. The past, it seemed, was determined to haunt him. Smith complicates matters. He understands my strategies. He knows me. Shall we neutralize him, sir? Kruger paused, a cruel spark igniting in his gaze. No, allow them their reunion. Allow them to believe they have a sliver of hope. It will make the inevitable far more satisfying. Ensure they do not reach civilization and loose ends. Understood. Understood, sir. Kruger ended the call, casually tossing the phone to a waiting soldier. He stared out at the swirling, turbid current, the oppressive jungle pressing in like a suffocating shroud. This had evolved beyond containing a mere outbreak. This was now about settling a long-standing debt, about proving to Smith that some trespasses demanded eternal repayment. He was coming for them, and this time, there would be no escape. Jungle secrets. The river writhed before them, a muddy leviathan swollen fat on recent deluges. Kapok giants clawed at the crumbling banks. Roots exposed like arthritic fingers. Adriana winced, the throb in her arm a persistent counterpoint to the oppressive humidity. Suggestions, doctor? John's voice was a gravelly murmur, his gaze already dissecting the jade labyrinth of the jungle. Adriana brushed a damp tendril from her forehead. There, a windfall. Submerged in parts, but perhaps solid enough. She indicated a colossal tree that bridged a narrower stretch of the waterway. John grunted, non-committal. Perhaps or it could flip and baptize us both. He tested the give of the bank with the heel of his boot. Let's move. His movements were fluid, economical, belying his size as he carved a path through the dense undergrowth with his machete. Adriana trailed him. Battling the prickling sensation of unseen eyes, they reached the fallen giant, its bark glazed with slime, providing only a perilous, narrow track above the rushing water. After you? John offered a hand, palm up. Hesitation flickered through her. Trusting him was still a gamble, but she was out of options. She grasped his hand, the rough skin a comforting anchor. Deliberately, they began their crossing. The slick surface offered treacherous footing, and the current clawed at her ankles midway. The tree groaned, shifting ominously. A sharp intake of breath escaped her lips. Steady. John's grip tightened, his voice a low reassurance. Don't look down. Eyes on me. His voice was a lifeline. She locked her gaze on his sun-beaten face, each line a testament to resilience. Inch by agonizing inch, they gained the opposite shore. Adriana stumbled onto the bank, her legs shaky beneath her. Thanks, she managed, still regaining her composure. John merely nodded, already surveying their surroundings, watching him. A ghost of a memory surfaced. Her grandfather, patiently guiding her young hands as they fished in a similar river, his voice humming ancient tribal songs. Summer afternoons spent with her mother's people, learning the secrets whispered by the rainforest. That world felt impossibly distant now. Grief pierced her at the thought of the imperiled villages, threatened by the virus, consumed by Omnicorp's insatiable hunger. Later, as they plunged deeper into the green abyss, Adriana discovered a forgotten instinct, navigating with an innate ease that surprised her. The earthy fragrance of decaying leaves, the cacophony of exotic calls, it resonated deep within her, a primal language she had almost forgotten. You seem at home here, John remarked, his eyes keen. I spent summers here as a child, she explained. My mother was Yanomami. My grandfather was a shaman. He taught me. She trailed off, reluctant to reveal such intimacies. John didn't pry. They continued in silence, broken only by the rustling canopy and the hum of unseen insects. Suddenly, John halted, his hand raised in warning. "Patrol!" He breathed, his gaze sharp. "Close." They melted into the shadows, concealed behind a curtain of thick vines. Through the foliage, Adriana glimpsed them. For figures in dark uniforms, heavily armed, their faces masks of grim purpose. Kruger's hounds, they were unyielding. Once the patrol had passed, John pressed onward. The sun began its descent, painting long, skeletal shadows across the jungle floor. They discovered a small clearing nestled near a rocky outcrop and established camp. John efficiently coaxed a small fire to life, while Adriana cleaned her suppurating wound as the fire crackled. Casting flickering patterns on their faces, John broke the silence. "You asked me why I help." He stared into the dancing flames, his voice heavy. "I lost my family here years ago to men like Kruger. They were searching for something. Never found it. But they took everything else." He offered no further details, but Adriana could taste the bitterness in his tone. The lingering pain of an open wound. She understood then that his rough demeanor was a carefully constructed facade, shielding a heart that had been irrevocably broken. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He shrugged, his gaze still locked on the fire. "Doesn't change anything. But it makes me understand what's worth protecting." Adriana stared into the heart of the flames, her own resolve steeling. She too knew what was worth fighting for. The lives of the Amazonian tribes, the preservation of a world teetering on the brink of oblivion. She would not allow Omnicorp to plunder it. She would not let Kruger prevail. The airstrip trap. The air hung thick and heavy, a humid blanket clinging to Adriana's skin as they neared the airstrip. Sweat trickled down her temples, stinging her eyes as she peered through the dense foliage. The incessant drone of insects amplified her anxiety. John, his senses honed by years of experience, moved with a quiet grace that belied his size, his hand a steadying presence on her arm as they crested a small rise. "Hold," he grunted, his voice barely a whisper. Below them, the abandoned airstrip shimmered under the oppressive sun. What had once been a rough-hewn landing zone was now a fortified encampment point. 2 watchtowers, crudely constructed from felled trees and corrugated iron, dominated the perimeter. Armed men, clad in dark fatigues and sporting mirrored sunglasses, patrolled with a lazy confidence that spoke volumes about their perceived invulnerability. A transport helicopter, its blades secured, sat squarely in the center of the strip, a predatory bird at rest. "Kruger," Adriana breathed, the name a bitter taste on her tongue. "He knew we were coming." Isabella, who had been silent and watchful, her face etched with a grim understanding, stepped forward. "They're not locals. Kruger's men, like you said, doctor, very bad." John scanned the scene, his eyes narrowed, calculating. "Too many. We walked into a damn trap." The airstrip, their only viable extraction point, was now a death sentence. Adriana felt a wave of despair wash over her. They were running out of time and options. The virus, if unleashed, would be catastrophic. "There has to be a way," she said, her voice tight. "We can't just give up." John turned to Isabella. "You know this land. Is there another way around? Any weaknesses in their defenses?" Isabella's gaze drifted across the landscape, her brow furrowed in concentration. She chewed on her lip, a habit Adriana recognized as a sign of deep thought. After a long moment, she spoke, her voice low and urgent. "There is a trail, barely used, to the south. It leads to a river crossing, but it is dangerous. The river is fast and there are creatures." "Creatures?" Adriana asked, her heart sinking further. As if Kruger's mercenaries weren't enough. "Caimans?" Isabella confirmed, her eyes meeting Adriana's. "Big ones. And sometimes anacondas. But the trail is hidden. They will not expect anyone from that direction." John nodded slowly, considering. The risk was high, but staying put was certain death. "What about the security?" Isabella pointed to a dense thicket of vegetation bordering the airstrip. They have patrols, but they are predictable. They follow the same path. Every hour that I have watched them, that I know their patterns. The information was a lifeline, that a fragile, frayed lifeline, but a lifeline nonetheless. Adriana felt a surge of renewed determination. They weren't beaten yet. All right, we take the trail. Isabella, can you lead us? I will, Isabella replied, her voice firm. But we must be quick and silent. Kruger's men are not stupid. John pulled a small, intricately carved wooden flute from his pack. He placed it to his lips and played a short, lilting melody. The sound, surprisingly gentle, seemed to blend seamlessly with the cacophony of the jungle. What's that for? Adriana asked, her brow furrowed. A distraction, John replied, his eyes still fixed on the airstrip. It will draw their attention, give us a window to move. As the last notes of the flute faded, a flicker of movement caught Adriana's eye. One of the guards in the watchtower shifted, his head turning in the direction of the sound. Another guard, closer to the ground, stopped his patrol, his hand instinctively reaching for his rifle. Now, John hissed, grabbing Adriana's arm. Move! Isabella, lead the way. They slipped into the dense undergrowth, the humid air closing around them like a suffocating shroud. Thorns tore at their clothes. Insects swarmed around their faces, but they pressed on, following Isabella's sure-footed lead. The sounds of the airstrip, the harsh shouts of the mercenaries, the metallic clang of their equipment, faded behind them as they plunged deeper into the green labyrinth. Adriana's breath hitched in her throat. She glanced back, catching a glimpse of John's grim expression. He was a wall of muscle and resolve, a shield against the dangers that lurked in the shadows. She didn't know how much longer they could keep running, but in that moment, she knew she wasn't alone. And that, she realized, was more valuable than any weapon. Battle at the airstrip. Heat waves distorted the air above the airstrip, painting a false promise of rescue on the baked earth. John, his senses a finely tuned instrument after years in the wild, surveyed the apparently empty space. Too damned quiet, he rasped, his hand finding the familiar grip of the machete strapped to his leg. Isabella, anxiety sharpening her young features, squeezed Adriana's arm. They were waiting for us. Before Adriana could reply, the tranquility shattered, gunfire ripped through the jungle's edge as mercenaries, dark figures in tactical gear, poured from the trees, weapons spitting lead. A guttural roar tore from John's throat, a primal challenge that resonated through the clearing as he exploded into action. He moved with a speed that defied his age. A contained storm of wrath. One mercenary stabbed with a blade. John countered with a savage parry, seizing the weapon and turning it on its owner. Another attempted to outflank him. John pivoted, his hand a bludgeon striking the man's windpipe. Adriana knew she couldn't remain a spectator. Her scientific mind, usually occupied with cellular landscapes, swiftly calculated the parameters of the deadly arena. Her gaze locked onto a generator humming near the trees, powering a communications array. She bolted towards it, dodging whistling bullets and weaving between the combatants. Reaching the machine, she wrenched open its casing, her fingers dancing across the intricate nest of wires. Years spent in the lab had fostered an unexpected deftness. Recognizing the system's weakness, she homed in on a key circuit, splicing the wires to create a destructive feedback loop. The generator convulsed, belched black smoke, and died with a groan, silencing the mercenaries' connection to the outside world. The abrupt communications blackout visibly rattled the mercenaries. John seized the opportunity, pressing his assault with renewed ferocity. He became an elemental force, a human whirlwind carving a path through the opposition. But they were too numerous. An overwhelming tide. Adriana's eyes darted around the airstrip, landing on a lone Cessna parked at the far end. Its propeller stilled if she could get it airborne. She sprinted toward the aircraft, bullets snapping at her heels, kicking up puffs of dust. Reaching the Cessna, she hauled open the cockpit door and clambered inside. The controls felt alien, but she quickly located the ignition. The engine sputtered, coughed to life, then roared. Its awakening adrenaline surged through her. She taxied the plane towards the airstrip's edge, hoping to draw fire. To buy John a chance. As she turned the Cessna to face the runway, a figure materialized from the emerald depths, blocking her path. Kruger, he stood motionless, pistol in hand, his eyes glacial. Going somewhere, Doctor? His voice rumbled, a low threat. Adriana's pulse hammered in her ears. Her hands tightened on the controls, her mind a whirlwind of calculations. Kruger was the gatekeeper to freedom. Behind her, the cacophony of battle, the shouts and gunfire, were slowly fading. John couldn't reach her in time. This doesn't need to end violently, Doctor. Kruger continued, his tone sickeningly reasonable. Hand over the research. Cooperate and you can walk away. Adriana met his gaze, defiance hardening her jaw. You think I'd let you unleash that plague on the world? Kruger chuckled, a mirthless rasp. Sentimentality. A liability. Omnicorp provides order. Control. A concept beyond your grasp. He advanced, raising his pistol. Adriana jammed the throttle forward, the engine screaming in protest. I understand that you're a monster, she shouted above the din, in a surge of desperate resolve. She released the brakes and floored the accelerator. The plane bucked forward, aimed directly at Kruger. He didn't flinch, simply raised his weapon. A cruel amusement glinting in his eyes. He knew she wouldn't dare heed the precipice of impact. Adriana yanked the controls, narrowly avoiding Kruger. The plane veered off the airstrip and onto the uneven terrain flanking the jungle, bucking and jolting. Violently, before she could correct, the Cessna slammed into a massive tree, the impact throwing her forward against the instruments. Dazed and aching, Adriana fought to clear her head. The engine shuddered and died. Kruger was approaching, his face a mask of cold fury. He yanked open the cockpit door, his hand reaching to drag her out. A shadow fell across him. John. He stood behind Kruger, his eyes burning with a frigid, lethal light. In his grip, he held the machete, its honed edge flashing in the harsh light. The conflict wasn't concluded. It had merely reached its crescendo. Face to face, Kruger's shadow fell over Adriana, the downed plane his backdrop. Rain slicked his tailored suit, turning the expensive fabric dark and menacing. The research, Doctor. Don't make this difficult. His voice was a low rasp, devoid of emotion. He held the tranquilizer gun loosely, but the threat was clear. Before Adriana could formulate a response, a guttural roar ripped through the air. Kruger spun, but he was too slow. John Smith, a force of nature unleashed, slammed into him. The tranquilizer gun clattered uselessly on the muddy ground. The impact sent Kruger staggering back, his expensive shoes losing purchase in the mire. He recovered quickly, a predatory glint igniting in his eyes. He shed his jacket, tossing it aside with a disdainful flick of his wrist, revealing the honed physique beneath. So, the protector arrives. I expected you'd be dead by now, Smith. John didn't answer with words, he answered with a fist. A brutal haymaker aimed at Kruger's jaw. Kruger ducked, the blow whistling past his ear, and retaliated with a swift kick to John's ribs. The fight was immediate, visceral, a clash of brute force and calculated precision. Adriana scrambled back, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She knew she couldn't physically match Kruger, but her mind was her weapon. Glancing at the wreckage of the plane, she noticed the ruptured fuel line, a steady drip of gasoline forming a shimmering puddle in the rain. An idea, reckless and dangerous, sparked in her mind. The two men grappled, a whirlwind of fists and elbows. John, fueled by a primal rage, fought with the raw power of a cornered animal. Kruger, however, was a master of controlled violence, each movement precise, each strike calculated. He landed a blow to John's temple, momentarily dazing him. You fight for nothing, Smith. Kruger spat, his breath ragged. This virus is progress. Omnicorp will control it, weaponize it, and the world will be streamlined. The weak culled, the strong ascendant. John shook his head, clearing the fog. You call that progress? That's just death, dressed up in a fancy suit. He surged forward, grabbing Kruger in a bear hug, squeezing the air from his lungs. Adriana knew she had to act fast. Ignoring the protesting screams of her own body, she crawled towards the plane, reaching for her discarded lighter. The smell of gasoline was overpowering now, the air thick with the promise of combustion. Kruger kneed John in the groin. Breaking his hold, he staggered back, clutching his abdomen, gasping for air. Kruger pressed his advantage, delivering a series of rapid-fire punches. To John's face. Blood streamed from a cut above John's eye, blurring his vision. Just as Kruger was about to deliver the knockout blow, Adriana flicked the lighter. A tiny flame bloomed in the downpour, licking at the air. She tossed it towards the gasoline puddle. The world exploded in a roar of fire. A wall of heat washed over them, forcing Kruger to shield his face. The flames danced, illuminating the jungle in an eerie, flickering light. The sudden inferno disoriented Kruger, breaking his focus. John, using the distraction to his advantage, slammed his fist into Kruger's exposed throat. Kruger choked. His eyes widening in surprise and pain, he stumbled back, clawing at his neck. Unable to breathe, he stared at John, his face contorted with rage and disbelief. You haven't seen the last of me, he rasped, before collapsing to his knees. He pushed himself up, scrambled away from the flames, and disappeared into the dense undergrowth. John stood, chest heaving, blood dripping from his face. The fire raged, consuming the wreckage of the plane. A pyre in the heart of the Amazon, he turned to Adriana. His expression unreadable. Adriana, coughing from the smoke, met his gaze. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her weak and trembling. She had never done anything like this before, never risked so much. He'll be back, John said, his voice a low growl. Kruger doesn't give up easily. Adriana nodded, her eyes fixed on the dark jungle where Kruger had vanished. I know. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was tempered with a newfound resolve. They had survived, for now. But the fight was far from over. At a new dawn. The chopper blades thwacked a rhythmic beat against the dawn sky as it lifted Adriana away from the smoldering wreckage below. The jungle bled into the horizon, a vast green canvas scarred by humanity's greed. She clutched the bio-sealed container to her chest, the fate of countless lives resting within its cool, metallic shell. Kruger was gone, for now, but the weight of his threat and Omnicorp's insidious reach pressed down on her. The sterile environment of the CDC lab in Manaus was a stark contrast to the humid chaos of the Amazon. White coats bustled, their faces etched with focused urgency. She handed over the sample, the culmination of weeks of relentless pursuit, to Dr. Silva, a woman whose dedication she deeply respected. Adriana, you have no idea how much this means, Silva said, her voice tight with emotion. We can begin immediately. The world owes you a debt. Adriana managed a weary smile. The Amazon owes us both. Let's just hope it's not too late. The next days were a blur of reports, debriefings, and endless cups of bitter, strong coffee. She watched, exhausted but determined, as Dr. Silva and her team worked tirelessly, sequencing the virus, testing potential inhibitors, racing against the clock. The news trickled out, contained outbreaks in remote villages, whispers of Omnicorp's involvement, growing panic. But with each passing hour, the scientists chipped away at the virus's secrets, inching closer to an antidote. Finally, the breakthrough came. A synthesized compound, designated AV9, proved remarkably effective in neutralizing the virus in vitro. Human trials began immediately. Adriana held her breath, praying for a positive outcome. News of AV9's success rippled through the region like a wave of hope. The mortality rate plummeted. The sick began to recover. The fear began to recede. Adriana felt a profound sense of relief, a lightness she hadn't experienced in months. With the immediate crisis averted, Adriana knew she couldn't rest. The underlying problems remained. The deforestation, the exploitation, the vulnerability of the indigenous communities. Omnicorp's presence was a festering wound, and Kruger was still out there. A venomous snake coiled in the shadows. Meanwhile, deep within the jungle's embrace, John Smith returned to his cabin. The familiar scent of damp earth and wood smoke filled his lungs. The silence was a balm after the cacophony of gunfire and explosions. He moved through the small space, his calloused hands tracing the worn surfaces of his few possessions. A dented coffee pot, a tattered map, the well-worn handle of his axe. He built a fire, the flames crackling and spitting in the hearth. He sat before it. His gaze lost in the dancing light, images flickered in his mind. Adriana's determined face, Kruger's cold, calculating eyes, the burning wreckage of the plane. He had walked away from the world, seeking solace in isolation. But the world had a way of finding him. He knew Kruger wouldn't stop. Omnicorp wouldn't stop. Their greed was a relentless force, and the Amazon was their target. He had tasted the violence again, felt the familiar adrenaline surge, and for the first time in a long time, he felt something akin to purpose. Not a desire for vengeance, but a commitment to protect, to stand against the darkness that threatened to consume everything he held dear. He rose and walked to the window, peering out into the dense foliage. The jungle was alive, teeming with unseen creatures, whispering secrets on the wind. He was a part of it, bound to it by a shared history, a shared destiny. He wouldn't seek out trouble, but he wouldn't run from it either. He would be ready. Weeks later, Adriana found herself back in the Amazon. Not in a lab, but in a small village on the Rio Negro. She was distributing medical supplies, educating the locals about preventative measures, and listening to their stories. The fear was still there, but it was tempered by a newfound resilience, collective determination to rebuild and protect their way of life. She often thought of John Smith. He had vanished as quickly as he had appeared, leaving behind only the echo of his gruff voice and the memory of his unwavering courage. She didn't know where he was, or what he was doing, but she felt a connection, a shared understanding forged in the crucible of their shared experience. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, she sat on the porch of the village clinic, watching the children play. A small boy ran up to her, clutching a crudely carved wooden figure. It was a man, tall and strong, with a hatchet slung over his shoulder. "He protects us," the boy said, his eyes wide with innocent faith. "He watches over the jungle." Adriana smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. Perhaps, she thought, their paths would cross again. Perhaps, together, they could forge a different future for the Amazon. A future where humanity and nature could coexist in harmony. A future where the whispers of the jungle were not drowned out by the roar of greed. She had a feeling that she would need his particular set of skills, and soon. The fight for the Amazon was far from over.